Thank you, Chairman. My apologies for coming in late. I was balancing the budget, so I was delayed.
Congress, you can go back and balance the budget. That's okay with me.
I know. Well, listen, my constituents would say the same thing.
Amen.
Quit talking. Go. Take action to save this country from a debt crisis. In all seriousness, both parties have made their contributions to this runaway deficit and unsustainable debt trajectory. I say that, Mr. Secretary, because I'm not giving any party a pass on it. But before we put out our budget and our long-term vision and the values reflected in that budget framework, we are unpacking President Biden's budget. And there's a lot to unpack because it's the highest levels of sustained spending, taxes, and deficits in the history of the United States. And this, after a lot of spending, a lot of inflation, soaring interest rates, and an economy that's spiraling downward. So I'm looking for a change in direction. I'm looking for a course correction, and I see nothing but doubling down on the policies that are driving the deficit spending and the debt. And very little consideration, in my opinion, for our children and grandchildren. Because we're really borrowing on their backs and their future to pay for this stuff. When it comes to healthcare, which is a big driver and one that we all have to roll up our sleeves and figure out how do we lower cost of healthcare across the board, I was very concerned about the expansion of ObamaCare subsidies in the IRA, about $65 billion worth. And now, in the president's budget proposal, I'm sure you're aware, $185 billion in more expansions. Here's the first rub for me. We're expanding to people who already have insurance, as I know you're aware. In the IRA, we only cover 1.7 million people who were uninsured. The rest of the folks that were covered, who were making, by the way, upwards of $200,000, $300,000, already had employer-based insurance. So we're spending taxpayer monies to subsidize people that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. In this second round, I've read, I haven't confirmed this, that people making upwards of $600,000 are getting ACA subsidies. Now, that doesn't make sense in any world to me unless the intention is to move our country to a universal care system, to a single payer system. Is that the real, it's okay, that's a position, it's a view of the world and government's role, it's not my view, but is that, and I'm not being cute about it, is that the intention of these expansions of Obamacare to people making hundreds of thousands of dollars who already have insurance? Are you trying to move the country to a single payer system? And I yield for the answer, and I appreciate your time.
Congressman, thank you for the question. I have to start by saying that your depiction of the president's budget, I cannot agree with. Your numbers that you mentioned, I don't know where you got them. I know nowhere where anyone has ever mentioned that someone making $600,000 would qualify for Affordable Care Act coverage with subsidies. But what I can tell you is this: the president, in his 2 years in office, has reduced the deficits each year. The president's budget proposal that he put forward to Congress also reduces the budget deficits moving forward over 10 years. And so I'm not sure where you're getting those numbers, but the president's numbers are out there, whether it's Office of Management and Budget in the executive branch, or whether it's the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, which does the scoring for Congress. I remember that from 24 years here. Both have said that the president's budget would reduce deficits.
Well, I know my time's expired, and so I don't want to, I'm not going to abuse that. I'm just going to say we have a wildly different opinion about it, and but I respect your answer and appreciate your time. So I yield back, and thank you.
Mr.